Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 96.
Come on.
Yes, 8 years. Come on. You guys can do better. Try it again. What episode? 96. There we go.
Live from DEF CON.
We are here with a really special guest, Tim Larkin. Everyone, Tim Larkin.
I guess.
So, Tim, maybe just for everyone here, just explain what it is that you do. It's really hard to put that into words if you don't do it.
Yeah. Basically, I teach people how to deal with the subject of violence. It's something that's been stigmatized so much that we've kind of lost the whole idea of looking at the concept of the tool of violence, where it fits in our lives, how it applies, in today's world, especially in a world like, we deal with all the technology and everything. It's often a harsh reminder that we live in a physical world. And so I just try to give people concepts on how to deal with that.
So obviously in that work, and this is the topic we were talking about, you have to probably teach people how to be aware of what's happening around them at all times.
Right.
So how does that work? I mean, how do you teach people to become aware of their surroundings?
Number one issue. This is your biggest challenge right here. Awesome video. If I probably should have brought it, but if you Google Seattle bus robbery, you'll see a robbery going down in Seattle on a bus where a guy literally is walking down the aisle of the bus with a .45, robbing people, and everybody is immersed in their phone.
Wow.
He literally is walking down the aisle, just taking stuff from people. People are so shocked, they're not even communicating to the other riders, hey, this guy has a gun. Finally, the gun comes in this guy's face, and he's the first one that takes action. He sees it, and he does a really good move. He redirects the vector. He goes right into the guy. He charges him forward. A lot of good stuff. In the other hand, he has this phone. What do you think he's doing with it? Wouldn't you think? He said bashing the guy's hand. No. He's shoving it into his pocket.
Oh, my.
A gun is in his face, and he is shoving it into his pocket. We don't realize how much these things possess our brains. I was talking to a neurologist who's in one of the groups that I'm in. He said, you guys probably already know this, but he said the stimulus that you get from texting, you know how they always tell you, like, if you want to remember something, you write it down, you physically write it down with your hand. Well, the nerves coming up to the brain, it's a stimulus that we like. We're getting double that when we're hitting it with both thumbs, and it takes possession of your brain. It literally does. That's why we're so addicted. So from a physical standpoint, I mean, this is nothing. How many times have you heard, hey, yeah, don't use your phone, don't use your phone? It's until you actually see. I like to use closed circuit TV video of crime, of violence, basically, to teach people. I don't want you to believe my opinion. I don't want you to see my canned scenario. It always makes the instructor look good. None of that is relevant. How do people actually respond? And this is probably one of the biggest things. This and earbuds is the other thing that really gets us on it. I mean, I know I'm not telling you anything earth-shattering, but you got to understand 70% of the people from the civilians that come to me after the fact. The reason I like to do groups like this, I'm hoping you guys are in the 30%, meaning violence hasn't entered your life yet. And that's just it. And the problem is, in this high-tech environment that we're in right now, there's so many great things available to us that, again, I'm going to say it again, we forget that we literally live in a physical world. And somebody that just wants to do violence to you at that point can literally turn your world upside down in a matter of seconds. That's really what, the message is when I come out. I mean, physically training yourself and how to exploit the human body, weaknesses in the human body, that's all interesting stuff. But really, the big thing that I try to do is make sure that I create as many rings around you so that violence doesn't enter your life. That's really what you want to accomplish. You don't want to have to deal with somebody, a bigger, faster, stronger individual that wants to do imminent harm to you, and you're devoid of choice. Meaning any exit plan you had at that point is gone. You have to deal with that. That is probably the base human fear that we all have. And so what I like to do is I like to take people, put them in that situation, but in a very good learning environment to deal with that, because the real scary thing is not that. The real scary thing is that we're all hardwired to be really good at violence. That's why we're here. We are here as a species because we are the best at doing violence. I mean, we're not the biggest, fastest, and strongest either. Now, that doesn't mean we're inherently criminal in our use of violence, but we do know how to tap into those things. That's the other aspect of it. People have a hard time dealing with the subject because we become, especially if you live in the United States, we become so good at violence that we don't even think it exists anymore. How many of you heard violent crimes down, murder rates are down? Have any of you guys heard those stats? Ask yourself this question, because this is a smart group. Is the murder rate down because we're less violent or because of the improvement in medical technologies? So stuff is being reclassified right now. People that would have died 5 years ago for some of these wounds are now living. It's not that we are any less violent. It's that we're getting better and better at fixing ourselves and doing things. So it's just something to consider. When you hear a lot of these stats, a lot of these feel-good stats, you have to kind of dig a little bit deeper and look. And again, I'm not advocating that everybody needs to train, that everybody needs to know this. But from a situational awareness standpoint, I just think by just talking about the subject, opening it up, it really helps, because whether or not you choose to physically train yourself for self-defense or anything like that, that's a personal choice, whether you want to put the time into it. I would advocate it. I think everybody, just like swimming, I look at self-protection as swimming. Parents don't teach their kids how to swim because they want them to be Michael Phelps. They teach them initially to swim because they don't want them to drown. And that's really it. It's a base skill we all should have. So we should all have a little bit of an understanding on how the tool of violence works and where it might ever fit in our life and when we ever might use it. For two reasons. You want to make sure that you react to situations that are avoidable the right way, because that's what gets most of us in trouble. Stuff that is inherently avoidable, we participate in, and then it can lead to situations that we really didn't want to lead to.
So your thing about the phone, that's obviously, we can all relate to that. When you said that, the first thing that popped in my mind was those videos online of people walking into things.
Oh, yeah.
Like, falling into lakes or walking into poles or windows because they're on their phones. But that is now like a cultural thing. So you're right that this is the biggest thing that stops us from being aware of our situation. How do we bypass that? Because it's not always easy to put it down. I know me, I have like 9 email accounts tied to my phone. I'm always working or texting someone or calling someone. So how do you get to that point to where you're like, I need to be aware of things? Saying put it away, it's probably never going to happen.
No, I'm very realistic about that. The first part, it's like any addiction. The first part is awareness, being aware of that. I'm there. If you're just physically aware that, hey, I was doing it just when I came in here because I was getting a hold of you. And I'm just walking through Caesars, and I should know better. I'm sitting there kind of, there are tons of people coming by. We all do it, but you catch yourself, and the idea too is unfamiliar areas, situations like that, public transportation. There are some obvious areas where, I understand you want to respond to this text, you want to respond to this email, probably not the best time. And the problem is when you get away with it. That's the problem. The problem is we get away with it. I call it sleeping with your head on the railroad track. Hey, train didn't come last night. I'm going to put my head back down on it again, And when the train comes, we're all surprised. Whereas all you have to do is take your head off the railroad track and you don't have to worry about that train coming. I'm not anti-technology at all, or I'm not this idea that I think, oh, geez, we all should be, nobody should listen to, earbuds or anything like that. What I am saying is there are certain environments that we should really be concerned about on that. And the reason being is when you see the physical attacks that happen to people, first of all, these things are getting more and more expensive. The new iPhone coming out, they're predicting that one of the models is going to be upwards of $1,400. I see these things in certain neighborhoods. And by the way, I know there's nobody here from the convention center because they hate me to tell you, around this strip, some of the most dangerous parts of Vegas, literally, for those of you that aren't here. I see tourists walking around all the time. They have no idea what's walking in and out of here. So it's just something to be aware of. It's one of those things that when you are in an unfamiliar area, it's probably really good to not deny all of your sensory systems. There's another video that I saw of a young female. She was wearing a hijab. She was walking, and here's the sad part about it. She was walking towards a group of guys. This is in London. Walking towards a group of guys that she knew were a problem. She recognized the situation was bad. She turned around, went to the other side of the street, and walked away. She still had her earbuds in. Guy runs up behind her, literally just jogs right up behind her, and just boom, just knocks her right down, horrible attack. But she had denied herself. Another situation where she recognized the situation was bad, And yet she took away probably one of her primary senses that she really needs. You know, when you want to talk about the technology, enhancing technology and awareness, this is our technology. You know, this is our surveillance systems.
I think all of us would like to think that we're Jason Bourne, you know, and it's like the guy by the door has a gun in his car and the guy over here looks overweight, but he can handle himself. So given that we're not all Jason Bourne, what's sort of the minimum level of situational awareness that we need to have, just sort of going to the grocery store and going to the bank and meeting our friends? I think you probably have a higher level that's required as opposed to the rest of us. So what kinds of things can we do minimally other than like setting the phone down?
People talk about things like, having their keys out, and they'll say putting their keys in between their fists, like they're going to, ram somebody with it. It's one of those telephone stories. What that originally started out with was have your keys out and ready so you can open your car and get in the car fast, because people are fumbling for their keys and just unaware, and that's when the attacks are happening. It's not because we want to turn our fist into a mace with keys. If anything, it's going to really screw your hand up. It hurts like hell if you try to use it. There's nothing I'm going to tell you that's going to be earth-shattering. You know, there's nothing I'm going to tell you that's really cool. But I will tell you this. Worst case scenario, you already know how to go after the human body. You already know inherently weak areas of the human body because you have them. And the problem is, I teach people to look at the human body for its similarities, not its differences. Most things, if you train combat sports or something, we're always talking about the differences. Bigger, faster, stronger. This guy's a really good technician here. Boom. I like to, when it comes to life or death, when it comes to using violence to save your life, I look at it the same way the worst of the worst look at it. The best information on how to use a tool of violence comes from the worst parts of society. I have a new book coming out, and I spent a lot of time dealing with the prison gangs and how they look at violence, and they look at it in a very utilitarian manner. And basically, it's the same way if you're going to go and you wanted to hack something, trying to relate to, something that's going on at this conference. You guys wouldn't necessarily want to go after the strongest, most well-protected part of whatever that system is. You're going to look for the entryways. You're going to look for the little anomalies that you can get in. Same thing with the human body. Why would we go after something that is bigger, faster, and stronger than us? Why wouldn't we exploit areas of the human body that we all have that are inherently weak? And that's just where I can see, you see this all the time. You see where a smaller person who understands how to injure the human body, not hurt, not inflict pain, but put real trauma on the human body where it takes the brain out of the situation. That's how they're able to save their lives. So the other flip side of this is worst case scenario, you're not as helpless as you think you are. Whatever you tell your brain is going to be true. If you tell yourself, I'm screwed, there's nothing I can do, your brain says, okay, cool. If you tell your brain, okay, I'm looking for opportunities, what opportunities are in front of me at that point? It changes. And the most unlikely people, I've trained literally tens of thousands of people all over the world. I've trained everything from the most elite combat unit, individuals to soccer moms around the world. And the people that have had to use the information outside of the professional world have always been the most unlikely people. I've had two of them that I literally said, God, give them a pass, please. I hope this person never has to use any of this information, because it was really hard for both of them to even deal with the information. They were prior victims of violence, and both of them had another incident happen, and they were able to use the information to save their lives. So there's nobody in this room. I've trained everybody. I've trained blind people. I've trained physically impaired people. I've trained people with, in wheelchairs. I've trained people with artificial limbs. That's not the question. The biggest challenge is how you look and think about violence and look at it and realize that violence is merely a tool. How it's used will be determined whether it was justified use of the tool or whether it is criminal use of the tool.
Oh, this is our friend Helen.
Hello.
Helen, say naughty.
Do it.
Do
You're
it.
starting to worry me with this. Naughty.
See?
Isn't that great?
I
It's like
love
the best
that.
word ever.
You're strange people.
Yes.
My question is, you're talking about the woman walking towards this group of men in London, and she recognised there was a problem, and she turned, she crossed the roads and went, and you said but she still had her earbuds in.
Yes.
Even if she hadn't, what action should she have taken against a group of men?
No, she would have heard, it was one man. It was a group of men, but one man was coming behind. She would have at least heard, whether or not she had any training or anything like that. You have to access an area of the human body that's going to get you a big result. And so oftentimes people will talk about, eyes, throat, and groin. The reason people like to talk about that is because there are the 3 areas of the human body that don't require body weight to employ to injure them, meaning we can literally use our hands and we can get a result in all 3 of those areas, and you can cause massive damage. You can blind a person, you can cause asphyxiation, you can crush testicles on a male, and that's going to get you a big result. The real thing to understand is that there's over 120 areas of the human body that get a result. You only have to know a small portion of those. But what you want to think about is, as soon as she would have been, say, knocked to the ground, or at that point, the first thing that hops out of people that we've trained, if they can still think and move, their first thought is, where's my injury? Meaning, where's my injury that I'm about to get from this position where I'm at? And that's what I want to hop out of my people when they've been in that situation. Now, I also think it's a failure. When somebody tells me they've had to use the information, I usually think it's a failure in a lot of ways, meaning, and they will admit that they knew they shouldn't have got themselves in that particular situation, but because of social situations or convenience, they put themselves in that situation and they had to use the tool. But thankfully, the tool worked for them. In that woman, had she gone to the ground, there were probably multiple areas that she could have gone after had she known. I can give you an example of a woman that we recently had it happen at Home Depot. She was putting her therapy dog in. She had a German Shepherd therapy dog. This was one of the women I was telling you about I hoped would have had a pass. Guy comes by and says, hey, can I help you? She was putting some equipment some gardening equipment that she got at Home Depot in the back of her car. And she said no. And as soon as she said no, she said, she just got that feeling. And next thing she knows, she's lifted up off of her feet. She had concealed carry where she was at. She had a gun right here. Her first thought was, I can't get to my gun. And she goes, okay, what's available to me? And what she realized was her elbow was available to her. She knew from proximity where she was being grabbed that the throat was right there. She came whipping around, hit the guy on the side of the neck. The side of the neck, you have the vagus nerve, you have the phrenic nerve, you have the carotid, and you have the jugular. You can either cause a concussion or you can interrupt nerve flow and blood flow. So the person's either going to faint or the person's going to be knocked out from a concussion. She got the guy to go down on the fainting aspect of it. So he had a vasovagal response on it. So he starts to faint. As he's fainting, she sees the top of his knee. That was the next thing that she saw. She put all of her weight and stomped on his knee and literally separated the cartilage and everything. Guy hit the ground, screaming, holding his knee. Now, this guy was 210 pounds. She was 140 pounds. And she was an older woman. She was in her mid-40s. Now, this is somebody who literally, up until, our training, had not done it. Now, what was it about our training? Was there anything special? Did I turn her into a super ninja? No, I just made her aware of stuff that we already knew. She just had knowledge of it. She knew what she could do from that particular position. The worst thing I could do to you is give you some phony scenario and say, okay, they're coming from the right. And when they come from the right, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. I have no idea. Violence is random. It's chaotic. So what we do is we take an area of the human body and we give you different sight pictures of that. And then we show you different tools on your body on how to use that, because I have no idea how it's going to happen to you and what position you'll find yourself in. But when you understand that, hey, it doesn't really matter what orientation I'm in, as long as I can think and move, there's an area of the human body I can get to. And what's interesting is that when people come back and tell us about it, they talk about the idea that they were ignoring what was being done to them, and they were focused on what they could do to the other person because they inherently understood that's the way out. And what's interesting is that's how predators think. That's just exactly how they never look at a situation from the victim's point of view. They always look at an act of violence, and they look at it from the person who's successfully using the tool of violence. That's half the battle right there with my people. I have to tell you it's okay for you to be looking at a situation from the perspective of the successful use of the tool. Now, you may be looking at a criminal situation. Doesn't mean that I'm condoning the criminal situation, but there's no good information from the victim's point of view. The real question is, how could have the guy who hit the girl done a better job? That's the question you want to ask yourself, because you don't want to put yourself in any victim information. Now, you're not condoning that. But what you're saying is, and then you look at it from a completely different manner. You look at it saying, well, gee, you know what? He didn't really have body weight in that shot. She got up right away. She was in there, and you go, oh, I would have done this. He should have been low. The targeting should have been lower. He didn't get a really good area there. He didn't use a good part of his body at that point. He was off balance.
So it's thinking like a predator.
Exactly.
To be able to defend against that.
We are predators. Okay, that doesn't make us bad. We've stigmatized these terms.
Tim, how much do you see denial playing a part in the choices that people make? Because I think all of us feel like, as we get older, we understand that it can happen to us, whether it's a heart attack or, any car accident, anything like that. But I think we still maintain our sense of safety through denying that bad things can happen to us, to our loved ones. So do you see that a lot in terms of just psychological setup?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of clients that originally would say the fear was, if I study the tool, if I study how to use this information, I get a lot of this karmically, I'm bringing it into my life. My first question that I'll tell somebody like that is, do you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen? Well, yeah, most of them do. Are you bringing fire into your life? No, it's one of these preventative things. My goal in having somebody come to me or learning about the tool or just reading about it and doing it is so that you can live a better life, so you can live a more relaxed life, so you don't have this unnecessary paranoia. You want to have a clear understanding of what to do, and you want to understand the basics of how to use the tool is really something there, especially the fact that this stuff brings predators. This is really valuable stuff, just walking around. You guys walking around with all your backpacks and everything. A predator goes, oh, that guy has a lot of stuff in that backpack. We're identifying ourselves that way. There are just certain things that we're doing that, the likelihood of something happening, probably very low for you, but you are identifying yourself as, hey, I am a valuable target. And then he's going to say, okay, valuable target, is it a valuable aware target? Because he doesn't want an aware target. He wants to wait till he gets the valuable unaware target. And so my goal with any of you would be, make sure you're the one that when they look at you, they go, yeah, not worth it. This is going to be too hard.
I want to get before you actually have to be in a situation where you have to defend yourself, right? So before that, how do you become that what you just said, where someone's going to look at you and go, it's just not worth it?
The optimal way to do it is to understand and walk yourself through the tool and walk yourself through the idea of how does violence work and understanding and get past that initial fear. That's the one thing. So if you can sit there and basically be in your underwear and understand that, hey, my brain is my primary weapon. My body is my tools, my immediate tools that are available to me. Anything else is ancillary. Anything else that I can put in my hand is ancillary at that point. If you can get to that idea, that awareness comes off to people. People that are self-aware that way, people just understand that, okay, this guy, it's not going to be, this person is walking with purpose. This person is going down. And I'm not talking like the Tony Robbins, look up straight, all that kind of, I'm talking about just awareness, meaning you're somebody that's walking around. You're not hunched over. You're not, completely immersed in something where you just be such an easy target. It's literally simply as much as looking up every so often, even if you're on this thing, every so often train yourself just to stop, and not in an intense way. You're not challenging anybody with eyes or anything like that. You're just aware. That stops 99% of it. When you ask these guys, you go, hey, what was it about that person? It's always the fact that they were unaware, that they were an easy target. They made themselves an easy target. When that happened to my client, when they asked the guy, they found the surveillance video and he had his van. It was like the classic. He had the van open, ready, running. He was going to throw it right in the van and take her at that point. And they go, why her? He said, well, I saw her put her dog into the cage and I realized she was completely focused on all her gardening equipment and she would just be easy to snatch from that position. And it was because she was staying completely focused in the back of her car and not taking time to look around at that point. And he had been driving that parking lot for about probably, I think they said about 2 hours looking for the right victim. These predators that we're after, these are not superhumans. When you see them, they're not necessarily physically imposing, a lot of them. I know we all see like the media look, everybody's, completely looks like The Rock and they're all yoked out and these guys are just, amazing operators. They're not. They're normal people and they're oftentimes very physically unimpressive, but they have intent. And that's something that you have to have if you're faced with violence. You have to learn how to determine intent. And intent can be the intent to be aware.
So you're talking about dealing with violence when it's happening. Have you had a situation when you can avoid the violence just through talking or social engineering the person that is attacking or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a young lawyer in London that was, I just happened to use another London story, getting out of the tube. He was going to walk through the park. It was 11:30 at night. The part of London that he lived in wasn't bad, but he was going to walk through the park to his flat to go see his fiance. And it was just a normal night. He was walking with his briefcase and all this stuff. Walks through, 2 guys follow him, jump him, throw him up against the tree, pull knives, demand his watch, his wallet, everything. This guy absolutely complies, gives them everything they want, gives the watch, uses all of his social skills. And they left. That was perfect use. He determined at that point that, hey, this is definitely antisocial aggression that's happening to me, but we're still conversing here. So there's the possibility, he chose the possibility to use his social skills. Good deal. Everybody loves that part of the story. Second part of the story is they came back. And when they came back, their heads were down, their knives were drawn, and they charged him. They stabbed him multiple times and killed him. And the reason being was when they walked away, one literally said to the other, shit, you saw my face. We should kill him. That they put that much thought into it, and they went back. My goal for any client that comes to me is for them to see the difference in those 2 situations. One situation, you have the possibility of employing your social skills and getting yourself out of that situation and, extracting yourself from that situation. The second situation, there's only one thing that's going to work, and that's going to be the tool of violence. That was an asocial situation, devoid of communication, imminent bodily harm. And the only thing that was going to do, you could not communicate with them. In fact, he was communicating with them. As he was being stabbed, they heard him yelling, why? I gave you everything. Why? Why? People were saying all of that. And again, it was one of those situations where, unfortunately, he had nothing in the toolbox to deal with a situation like that. That's the danger. There's many, many times that we get ourselves in. But the problem is oftentimes we engage in ways with people that we don't know in socially aggressive ways. And because, especially if you live in the United States, you feel really guarded. I have a friend who is a world-class strength trainer. And when he comes to town, any town, he trains a lot of military police and also just world-class athletes. But he'll always ask the local cop in town if it's a new town to him. And I'll always ask the local cop, he'll go, hey, where do all the prisoners, ex-felons work out? And then he goes, oh, well, they work out at this gym. He goes, okay, that's where I'm going. Now, why do you think he goes there? It's by far the most polite gym in the town. The worst are the ones in the better areas. If any of you guys are like from the East Coast, like an Equinox or something like that, that's where you find the most arrogant, rude people who will just step in front of you, grab equipment, do stuff like this. Where the felons are, they live from a different code. And there's an underlying situation that if you violate that code, it will be backed up with violence. And so everybody's a hell of a lot more polite. Now, I'm not suggesting, what I'm trying to tell you is we socially sometimes get away with being aggressive and we never know who we're dealing with. I tend to treat everybody like they're 6 seconds away from a shooting spree and I don't want to trigger them. Everybody else says when they meet me, oh God, Tim's so nice. I'm not nice because I'm necessarily nice. I'm nice because I don't know you. I don't know what's going on in your head. I don't know where you're at. And I want to make damn sure that I'm having a conversation that's not going to lead to something I don't want it to lead to, because I don't want to flip that coin, because every time you have to use violence, it's a coin flip. Who is going to get the first injury? When you look at acts of violence, when you look at them, turn the sound off and you just look at a physical act of violence, you will see one point where somebody injures the other person. And that's usually the defining moment of the act of violence where it goes horribly wrong for the other person at that point. And that is a coin flip. And I am just as capable of being injured as anybody else. I say physically, I stay in shape, but it's all an illusion. This means nothing when it comes to violence.
So, Tim, it sounds like you're constantly de-escalating then. You always are in the mindset that you need to prevent the situations because, as you said, anybody can be violent. Anyone can step over that line. So for you, that's your prevention. That's your preventative measure, being situationally aware and constantly being in a sort of a de-escalation phase then psychologically, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's funny. When I came up here, 2 of the guys rightfully grabbed me because I didn't have a badge. And it was one of those things that the valet guy gave me a hard time and just didn't want me to park there and everything. I had to bribe him and park. So I was kind of agitated a little bit. And I came up and these guys, and the way they came up, they, hey, you need your badge and everything. And I responded. I went with it, and I kind of gave a little bit back to them. And then I caught myself. I go, quit being an asshole, and I told those guys, I go, you know what? You guys are doing exactly what you should be doing. And I said, hey, I hope you understand. I'm not trying to be difficult or anything. It's just I'm supposed to meet up for this podcast. But there's an incident that literally just happened. Listen, I'm as aware of as anybody else that, it's easy to trigger. But you catch yourself because you just don't need to have that aggression. You don't need to trigger it in somebody else.
Say you are being situationally aware and you realize there's a potential aggressor. Would you prioritize preparing for flight or preparing for physical conflict?
The only time I advocate using violence, and when I talk about violence, I'm not talking like punching, kick. I'm talking about fighting for your life, irreparably doing damage to the other person to save your own life because you're facing imminent grievous bodily harm and you're devoid of choice. If you possessed a firearm, if you had a firearm in that incident at that time, you would feel justified unloading that firearm into the threat. That's the level that I use for when I would respond. So it's really easy for me to use that as my level. Is it time for that? Is it time for me to pull out the gun and unload? No, it's not. Is my ego hurt? Do I feel like I was disrespected in this? Yes. Was this guy rude to my wife? Yes. Is it worth the next step? Does it pass the 3-day test? 3-day test is this. In 3 days, if you're 6 feet under or you're sitting in a jail cell, was it worth it? And that's just it. If you choose to participate, if you choose to respond with violence, everything goes out the window at that point. You're a participant now.
So it sounds like flight is the better option if you can do it.
Flight is always an option. If you have the ability to lead. There's a really famous MMA fighter. If any of you guys follow MMA, he was a former champ. His name is Baz Rutten. And so everybody loves Baz because he's a really entertaining guy. And he has a self-defense clip that's out on YouTube. And it's a very, very funny one. It shows him in a bar and it shows him just doing all these horrific things to a guy who basically sat down, took his bar stool or, grabbed his drink or did something like that. And he shows this stuff and it's wildly effective stuff. The worst context ever. It's literally criminal context. It'll get you right into jail. Now, the interesting part about that is he tells a story being in Amsterdam, basically choosing to participate. Just kind of what this gentleman just said. A situation, he knew this one guy was giving him a hard time. Boz decided to go and take care of it. Got the guy outside. Boz can take care of himself. Gets out there and does a number on this guy and his 2 friends and then runs away. Spent a terrified night in his hotel room thinking the police were going to come for him because he was sure he killed that guy. He knew he wasn't justified. That's the kind of stuff when we let our egos get out of control. Or even if you sit there and say, well, I'm not the kind of person, I wouldn't want to get my ego out of control because I don't want to fight. You might not have the choice. Your ego might have got out of control because you thought you could say that really good comeback and that really good thing. And you thought you were in a safe zone and you thought like, hey, this guy's not going to overreact. It's the disproportional response that we see that's so unnecessary. And it's not worth the comment. It's not worth the extra thing. It's okay if you can walk out, that's fine.
What Tim has basically described are things like amygdala hijacking. Okay, we talk about how when your emotions rule, you're not going to make good decisions. He's talked about ego suspension and the importance of being able to put aside how you feel and how you feel you should be treated in order to de-escalate a situation. So it's interesting that he's in the field of physical security and he's discussing all the same things that we talk about when we talk about security and how we have our populations make good decisions. So I think it's really interesting to see because really what we're talking about is human behavior, right? And the choices that we make, whether that is clicking on a fish or punching someone in the face, all the same things come into play.
They seem a little different. I just want to say.
They do. They feel different. They really do. But really what it's coming down to is a decision that we make and a behavior as a result. So I think it's really interesting. All of the same principles apply. Yeah,
because you hear these stories all the time, like from what Tim was just saying about, you cut the guy off in traffic and next thing you know is he pulls a gun out and starts shooting you. Yeah. So that's usually those things happen because the lack of ego suspension. Like I'm not going to let that, and then you end up getting into some altercation that could have been avoided completely by just not caring about it. Yeah. We talk about this all the time when it comes to security awareness education, obviously not leading to violence ever, but how people make decisions and that lead to breaches in companies. And it's like the same exact principles of what you just said. But interesting to hear it being applied to like a physical environment as opposed to a technological environment where you have to make those same decisions.
But really, it's all the same, right? Because it comes down to the decisions that we make and the behaviors that we take as a result of those decisions. So all the same stuff applies. So everything that Tim has talked to you about today, it applies within your environments, within your security programs, amazingly enough. We're trying to make this work, but then we realize what Tim has to say works for all of it because this comes down to how we feel, how we decide things, and how we think, basically.
Yeah.
Well, you guys already are doing, in a technological aspect, you're using violence. You know, you're basically, when you're going in, you're exploiting code and you're seeing things like, you're doing the same thing that, you know, an Aryan Brotherhood member does when he's taking out, you know, one of the shot things. He's going, okay, where are the most vulnerable areas here? How can I set this thing up? It's super important to him because it might have taken 6 months to set up this particular situation. And I know that seems extreme. I get that seems really extreme.
I don't know. I've sent out some madly aggressive fish in my day. Just saying.
That's how they look at it. That's exactly how, when you talk to people, they look at it in a very business-like manner. You know, and when I talk to coders, especially, I talk to a lot of guys when I go up to Silicon Valley, and their thought process is the same way. You have a lot of this. It's just applying it. It's just when we apply it in the physical world, obviously the stakes are huge, and we want to make sure we get it right. The good thing about it, and just the one thing to remember, is if we had to be bigger, faster, and stronger to be here, we wouldn't be here. You do have this hardwired in you, and you're probably using it in your day in, day out use. You're just not thinking of it as, you know, those type of skill sets.
The question I've got is, being a parent with children, is there a different angle at this or a different approach? Like, how would I as a parent bring this to my children? Because I don't want to tell them to, you know, at the last moment, be as violent as you can be. I do want my children to be safe.
Right. So I have 4 kids. My oldest is 22, and then I have a 6-year-old boy, and I have twin daughters that are just turned 4. My 22-year-old got exposed to this type of information when he was 17. And the reason I didn't want him to navigate high school with this information. Now, I know high school is different. I'm going to put a blanket statement. Boys mature at a later rate. There's always a risk. If you have a son, there's the risk that they're going to use the information socially. You know, because they don't have that development yet. And so I'm very careful in training males.
Hard to suppress your ego when you're 17-year-old male.
It is.
Really hard.
And you see ridiculous stuff on YouTube where they're punching each other in the kidneys and doing all this stupid stuff. So I physically made that decision that I didn't want to train my son at that age. My daughters will be trained at about 11. Sexual assault's happening on women at a horrific rate. Last book that I did was called Survive the Unthinkable, and it was dealing with that. And I had no idea how bad it was. I knew it was bad. I had no idea how bad it was. Girls also, women also tend to be very utilitarian with the subject. Men socially communicate with violence. You know, we do things like in the locker room type thing. So we actually have a harder time navigating violence than women do. It's always real for women. If a man puts his hands on a woman, it's real. It's going to happen. It's a bigger, faster, stronger threat. It's just there. Women are far easier to train. They get it much quicker. They don't try to muscle things. I will be training my daughters much younger than I would train my sons. And it's because girls don't have any interest in using the material. They're not like boys. They're not going to have that locker room mentality. I know you see the anomalies. I know you do see some stuff that's out there, but it really is minuscule when a woman would ever choose to just socially use violence. Louis C.K. does a pretty funny monologue on this. He's saying he doesn't understand how a woman would ever willingly get into a car with a man because the number one threat to men in the world right now is heart disease. And number one threat to women is men as far as violence, when violence comes down on that he came down. And it's just, when you look at statistics, it's huge. So unfortunately, it's up to us to take care of and protect our children. If you've ever seen any of those things where they try to educate kids and they've tried to say, hey, okay, don't go with this guy, don't go with that guy. Predators are so manipulative, especially child predators are so manipulative. Whenever they've done the scenario-based training, kids that literally they've trained them for 2 weeks. They go to the park and some guy says, hey, will you help me with my puppy? My puppy, boom, they get right in the car every time for the most part, you know, and it's just not there. So unfortunately, it's up to us. It doesn't mean you have to be a helicopter parent, but you just got to understand, you know, that any opportunity that a predator has, especially for child predator or something like that, there's no contest there. Mentally, physically, there's just no contest.
So, Tim, tell people how they can find out more about you.
Probably, I have a ton of free information. I have a blog at just timlarkin.com. It's probably the easiest way to get a hold of it. We've got, newsletter. There's tons and tons of free content on there. If this subject was interesting to you, we've written extensively on this. I try to give you stuff that's actually actionable and usable and stuff. And I realize it's probably unusual. You probably expect me to be talking about punching and kicking today on stuff. I find that's the easiest stuff in the world. And it's the least important. If I can't get you to think about the subject differently, that's what makes predators so damn dangerous. That's the real thing. It's changing your brain. If I can get you to change your brain, the physical stuff's easy. I can train you the physical stuff. And we all have the same advantages. That's a kind of cool thing. Male, female, it doesn't matter. When you're looking at the similarities and vulnerabilities of the human body, we're all vulnerable. And you see it time and time again. And if you don't think so, just look up MMA. People ask me all the time, well, if this stuff's so good, why don't they use it in the UFC? I go, it's used in the UFC all the time. It's undefeated. It's never been crowned heavyweight champ or anything, but every time it's been used, it's ended the competition. Because we're talking about injury to the human body. So every time you see something going horribly wrong, when you gamify violence, there's only one way you can gamify violence, and that's take injury out of the situation. It's the only way you can make it entertaining. If we put injury into it, it would just be horrible. Maim, crippling, killing is not anything that people visually want to see, believe it or not. I know we all think that. Roman times, the worst thing that could ever happen to a gladiator is just go in and kill a guy right away. That was boring. They wanted to make it there, same thing. But the problem is we look at these physical specimens, and they are physical specimens, and they're amazing athletes. But the reason they're able to do what they're able to do is because of the rules that are allowed. They're able to show their skill sets and pit skill against skill. The real world, when you go out and everything's open, now all the outliers are available and the injuries available. Very different situation. The woman I told you about, if we put her in the cage with that guy from Home Depot and we said, go, we know how that would have turned out. But what I can give anybody is the ability that if a predator grabs you, gives you an opportunity, I can teach you how to exploit that opportunity. And that's really what we're talking about. And anybody has that skill set.
A lot of people that listen to our podcast love to read. So we always ask for like 1 or 2 book recommendations. It doesn't even be on the topic that you just talked about, but is it, any books that you think are something that you would recommend to people to read?
The Book of 5 Rings is a book that's actually really good. It's good strategically. They talk about the art of war too. But the Book of 5 Rings is something that you need to understand when it comes to violence. This book was written hundreds of years ago, and it's just as relevant today. Miyamoto Musashi wrote it, the most famous swordsman, martial artist in the world. He's held at the highest level when you're talking about martial arts. Killed over 60 people in battle, hand-to-hand combat, with weapons. Oftentimes he used a wooden sword against guys that had real swords because he was bored. That's how good he was.
Tim, you're only the second person I've ever met that's read that. The other is my husband, in fact, so...
Oh yeah, but
pretty awesome.
Here's what I'll leave you with. Okay, this is the deal. He was by far the most successful swordsman in feudal Japan at that time. His system was not recognized the whole time he was alive, meaning a sanctioned martial art. It was not recognized, not supported by anybody. Reason being was it was too effective. The use of the tool of violence is too straightforward. It's too easy. It's too applicable. The sword routines that had all the elaborate movements and all the great things and all the athletic ability, those were the ones that were very popular during that time. Even though this guy by far was the most effective and direct in his methods. You'll find oftentimes the people that gave the most direct information were ignored during their time. And if it comes to violence, he has great methods that not only will apply to your business or any of your thought process, but also very, very good, insightful information. He wrote it when he was 60 years old after a lifetime of being a warrior. And it's a really good read.
We have a question.
Okay.
Actually, you have now met the third person who's read that book.
Come give me a hug after the podcast.
Is it cool if I give you some fun facts? Okay, so Miyamoto Musashi won his first battle when he was about 12 or 13, and he won against a master swordsman. He never lost a battle, and he died comfortably in his bed in his 60s. So there you go, fun facts. So great book.
Yeah. Okay, so that's awesome. It was a good DEF CON. Let's just recap some of the things as we close up. Okay, so Mission SE Impossible went really, really good, right, this year. But that is a tiring. If you were here, anyone here Thursday for that? Were you here? Okay, a few of you. So that's our challenge where we have like a laser grid and handcuffs, and that's why these are laying around, by the way. Someone tweeted, why do you have handcuffs laying around in the SE Village? That's why, because we handcuff you and we do things, we have to pick locks and, scale a laser grid and things like that. It was just tons of fun Thursday. And then Friday, we kicked off our kids competition, which went really well. That was an awesome competition this year. And we had our 2 winners for that. And then the SECTF, both Friday and Saturday, was a little bit ridiculous this year, right? If you guys sat on the calls. Okay, so our first place winner was Chris. He called Mattel. That was a really amazing call, right? If you were in for that. Well, I think there was only one other time in the history of the SECTF that I saw people get that many flags on one phone call. It was like literally unbelievable. I don't think I've ever gotten that many flags on a phone call in a row. It was such a great pretext. He really got helpful people, and then called back and did it again, right? Which is even more ridiculous. So it wasn't just dumb luck. It was his pretext, and obviously that company needs some help with training. And then our second place winner, Rachel, here, sitting right here with us. And again, it's, not only is she scary and creepy in person, but also on the phone, okay? Also on the phone. Amazing job. The point scores this year, they had some huge gaps, like our first and second place winners are really, really high up there. We had a third place, which was better. And then after that, kind of everything else went down quite a bit. So it was interesting to see. We'll be working on that report, but we have an SECTF at DerbyCon. So we're going to also use that data for the report. And I think as I'm saying that, I'm realizing how much I hate my own life right now. So we're going to be taking all that data. So the SE report that we issue this year will be not just DEF CON, but it will be also the DerbyCon calls that are done there. Some excellent speeches in the village this year. We are here next year, Caesars, from what I've heard. I think they'll make a big announcement at the closing ceremonies. I haven't still yet heard if it's a black badge contest this year. Dang it. Usually they tell me by now. I was trying to reach out to the guys to find out if I can make that announcement on the podcast. So I can't. I never assume. It's always a danger to assume. So we have been for 7 years now. But I don't want to ever make an assumption that that's going to occur, because as soon as you do that, that's the time that it doesn't happen. And then you're looking like a fool. So we'll wait to hear that. But yeah, so we have our 5-day training class, which is on the website now for Orlando, February 5 through 9. And the one for Bristol is not announced yet. And of course, I don't know if we're invited to Black Hat next year. So we'll put that on the site if we are. And that is all the training that we have. So now we can do it. Guys, this year was amazing at DEF CON, and I've literally been walked up to by numerous goons saying that you have complained so much to them about the room size. Yeah, that they're asking me to tell you to stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Keep complaining, okay? Yeah. Dan, you were up here this morning, right? When that guy came up, was that you or was that you, Evan? One of you guys, when the goon came up this morning, and he's like, so we got the message. Your room is very small. How much bigger would you like next year? And I said, at least double. And he's like, we're going to see what we can do. And I'm like, I'm not telling them to stop. So maybe all of your tweets and complaining and stuff will make an effective change. And I think the goons also complained, believe it or not, because they saw they had to control the lines, right? And the first day, our line went down to the end of the hallway. Our second day, they tried this way thinking it would be better, and they went to the escalator, and then they had to loop it around. And then the third day, we just had lines going both ways. So I think they're finally like, okay, we need to figure out how we control this. So the goal will be, if next year we get twice the room, we got to do the same thing. And we got to have lines everywhere so we can pack it out. But I just want to thank you all from my team and I. This is a great village, and it's not just because of what we do. So you guys actually follow with the rules. We had 2 wallets lost this year, and the guy, they handed them in, and when we found the owners, there was nothing missing. And we're at a hacker convention, and you guys didn't steal anything from the wallets. That's really cool. I mean, it's really awesome. All the guys' credit cards were in there, and all of his money, and everything else that he had in the wallets were there. And he was like, "Man, that's awesome." He was like, "That's really great." So I guess some woman lost her wallet and her cell phone over in another village, and they're gone forever. They're gone. I mean, my buddy up here, his wife lost her cell phone, and they had to shut it off fast. So this it makes me feel good that people can come in here and we can be kid friendly and family friendly, and people also feel good being here, even though we're at a HackerCon. So please reach out, stay in touch. I also want to thank you all for your support with the foundation that we announced, Innocent Lives Foundation. If you haven't checked it out, you can at innocentlivesfoundation.org. The support just keeps coming in for that. It really is kind of heart-wrenching to see how many people have come up and offered their hand and support. And I just don't do this. Last night at the party, people were coming up and handing me money as donations. I'm like, I don't know how to do cash donations. I don't know what to do with this now. So I have to figure that part out. But your support has been really, really amazing. So I want to thank you personally for all of that. I think that is about it. So, you know how to check us out, social-engineer.org or social-engineer.com. The Sultry Asian.
Yes, that's me.
That's you. It's TFT.
Yeah, TFT Tim Larkin.
TFT Tim Larkin, human hacker. Our corporate is SOC Engineer Inc. You guys help me in thanking Tim for coming out and doing this today. We'll see you guys all at closing ceremonies, okay? We have nothing else here today. I mean it. We really don't. We're packing up, and we're going to try to relax a little, but we'll be around, so feel free to stay and chat. I think, are you running right away?
I can say a little bit.
Okay, so if you have any more questions for Tim or want to chat, come on up. Thanks, guys.